I was mid-sentence when Mr. Caldwell slammed his hand on the desk and leaned in close. "Nobody else would hire you," he said, like it was a verdict. The room went quiet. My chest tightened. I could feel the fluorescent lights humming, like the whole office was listening. My mouth went dry. I had worked 12-hour days, stayed late to finish reports, and covered for people who never thanked me. He had been my boss for 3 years, and in one breath he erased every late night, every missed birthday dinner, every effort. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. Instead, I shoved my resignation into his hand, even though I hadn't meant to quit that day. The words tumbled out because my hands were shaking. "If you think that, then I should leave." He looked pleased, like he'd won something. I walked out with my bag, fighting the urge to cry. Outside, the winter air hit my face, sharp and clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I ignored it. I felt small, exposed. Yet under the sting of his words, something else grew. A hot, steady resolve that I would prove him wrong. I didn't know how. I only knew I had to try. On the sidewalk, I sat on a low ledge and tried to breathe. People hurried by with steaming cups and earbuds in, unaware of the earthquake in my chest. I pictured my rent notice, the grocery list on the fridge, the kitten I'd rescued 6 months ago who curled into my neck at night. The steady drip of worry pushed at me. I opened my phone and scrolled my resume, surprised at how short it looked after hearing him say I was unwanted. I thought of every job I'd ever wanted but never applied for because I didn't feel good enough. The truth hurt. His words cut because I had sometimes believed them. That belief had kept me small. A woman passing by dropped her bag of apples, and she cursed, then laughed nervously as strangers helped her gather the fruit. The small chaos made me laugh, too. In that laugh was the first crack of change. I stood, palms numb from the cold, and decided to treat the next week like a test. No pity, no begging, no pleading. I would apply, call, reach out, and do whatever it took to show him he was wrong. I pulled out my laptop from my bag, settled on a bench, and began to type. My first move was messy but honest. I updated my resume and sent it to 3 companies I admired. I kept it simple. Skills I had, projects completed, the numbers I'd improved. I wrote a short cover letter that did not beg. It said who I was and what I did. I hit send and felt a small ping of power. Then I messaged Ella, a former colleague, asking if she could introduce me to anyone in her network. Ella replied within an hour with a heart emoji and a list of names. It was the first sign that maybe the world wasn't closed to me. I set up a LinkedIn post, careful and confident. I didn't mention Mr. Caldwell or his cruel line. Instead, I wrote about learning to use tough feedback as fuel. It felt strange to put myself out there, but the notification started soon after. A like, a comment, a share. My inbox swelled. I scheduled 3 phone interviews across the week. My hands shook when I closed my laptop, but not from fear this time. It was anticipation. I allowed myself to hope a little. The kitten at home greeted me like I was the most important person alive, and somehow that mattered more than any job title. Still, the memory of his voice lingered, a shadow I wanted to step out from. The first interview came like a surprise rain. I answered with honest stories about projects I led and mistakes I learned from. They were quiet on the other end, then warm. I could feel the conversation moving from rehearsed answers to real talk. They asked about leadership and pressure. I spoke about staying calm when pipelines slipped and how I kept teams motivated when budgets tightened. I didn't mention that Mr. Caldwell had told me I was worthless. I needed to stay clean for myself, to build something that belonged to me. After the call, I floated a little dizzy. A man called to say he wanted me for a second interview. I breathed into my belly and wrote notes for questions they might ask. I also found a small notebook and listed things that made me good at my job. Patience, curiosity, the stubbornness to keep fixing things until they worked. Then I called my sister to tell her the news, and she cheered like a champion. Her voice steadied me. Still, beneath the tiny victories, the sting remained, proof that people could cut deep with words. I tucked that sting into my pocket like a coin and kept walking, each step a steady beat toward something unknown. On day 3, a twist. I received an email from an industry newsletter that highlighted a startup needing someone to run operations, with a line that said they wanted real people, not polished robots. My heart leaped. I sent a tailored note that morning, honest and energetic. I pictured walking into a place where mistakes were allowed and curiosity mattered. That afternoon, a recruiter from another firm called and said they loved my portfolio. Suddenly I had not one, not two, but three threads tugging at me. It felt like the moment a dam began to break. I sat down hard on my couch, the kitten circling my feet as if sensing the rising water. But then I read a comment thread on my LinkedIn post. Someone questioned my tactics, called me too ambitious. The old voice returned. Self-doubt crept in, whispering that these opportunities might evaporate. So I forced a rule. Every time doubt knocked, I would list 3 wins from my last role. It worked like a charm. I remember the major campaign I salvaged and the quarter we hit targets because of changes I pushed. Those wins were honest facts. I took them to each interview like armor. The week had turned into a test of nerves and truth. I was no longer running from Mr. Caldwell's words. I was running toward proof I could be more. On the morning of the 4th day, I received the first firm offer. It was concise and clear. A role I could do, a team that was excited. My chest swelled. For a moment, I imagined walking back into the office, Mr. Caldwell seeing me with a new card and his face falling. But I reminded myself this wasn't about him. It was about me building a life. I called my sister, and she screamed so loud I thought neighbors would come. Tears slipped out when I hung up. Then the second offer came by phone. Different company, better title, a manager whose laughter over the line made me trust her instantly. Now I had to think. I walked through my apartment slowly, debating. Money matters, of course, but culture did too. The third offer arrived late. A small firm with a senior mentor who promised growth and messy projects that matched my appetite. I scribbled pros and cons in a spiral notebook, feeling like a student choosing classes for the first time. Each option had a different future. Still, a tiny part of me wanted to call Mr. Caldwell and read him the offers. The thought made me laugh because it felt childish. Instead, I held a folded piece of paper with numbers and dates and did something smaller. I sat with a feeling of being wanted. Decision time tangled with a new twist. The 3 offers wanted answers within a week. My calendar became paper with arrows and pros cons. The first company had stability and benefits. The second had a title upgrade and more salary. The third had mentorship and messy projects that would teach me faster. I paced and interviewed managers again, asking questions I hadn't asked before. What happens when things fail? How do teams support personal boundaries? How do they measure success? I realized my hunger wasn't just pay, it was respect. I called Ella and asked bluntly about the cultures. She gave honest takes and warned me about long hours at one place and micromanagement at another. Then a curveball. Mr. Caldwell's office sent an email offering an apology and asking if I'd return under new leadership. My stomach dropped. The timing felt like a trap. I answered politely, saying I needed time. I didn't want to return to a place that had broken my confidence. The week had shifted from a mission to prove him wrong into a deeper question. What did I want my life to look like? I slept poorly, dreaming of staircases and closed doors that opened when I stepped carefully. I decided to visit the offices for a real feel. The first stop was the stable firm. The receptionist was warm, the team efficient, but the space felt boxed in, rows of desks and strict schedules. It would be safe, predictable. Then I visited the second company, hip and loud, where people joked and ping-ponged ideas. The role there came with respect and more pay, but I sensed pressure to perform fast. The third firm was in a renovated warehouse. People moved like they were building something. The senior mentor stopped our meeting to help a junior colleague with a problem. I felt seen there. At lunch, I sat on a bench and texted my sister. It's safe, fast, and growing. She replied, "Pick the one that grows you." The words held me. I thought of the note from Mr. Caldwell again. His apology now ringed with the smell of guilt, too little for the wound. I realized my choice had to be forward-looking. I wanted a space where failure meant learning, not proof I wasn't good enough. As the sun set, I tucked my notebook away and made a decision to accept an offer that promised both growth and compassion. But the week still had one final, unexpected twist. On the penultimate day to reply, a 4th message arrived. Not a job offer, but an invitation to speak at a small industry panel. A respected editor had seen my LinkedIn post and asked if I'd share my story of resilience. My mouth went dry. Public speaking terrified me, but this felt meaningful. It was proof that my voice mattered beyond job titles. I accepted. The panel was 2 days away during my decision countdown. I rehearsed, shaping my story into slices: challenge, choice, growth. I decided to mention Mr. Caldwell only as a turning point, not the villain. The night before the panel, I rehearsed in front of the mirror and cried a little, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had happened. The kitten watched, head tilted. On stage, under the lights, I spoke slower than I thought possible, each word deliberate. People nodded. Afterward, a woman in the front row tapped my shoulder and handed me a business card. She ran a nonprofit looking for operations help. Her eyes held gratitude and a need. That night, the timing of the week felt almost too poetic. Offers, panels, and a new door opened by telling the truth. I went to bed both exhausted and awake. The very next morning, the nonprofit emailed to ask for a meeting. Their mission was simple and urgent: help refugees settle in the city. My heart clenched at the thought of doing work that mattered. I scheduled an interview that afternoon and spent the morning deciding how I wanted to be seen. Competent, compassionate, hungry to learn. I answered questions with examples of organizing teams and building trust, and they spoke about people whose lives would change with small systems done well. I left feeling hollow and full at the same time, as if I had opened a suitcase and found both an old letter and a new map. Back home, I looked over the 3 offers again. The stable firm called to increase their salary. The second company offered flexible hours. The third promised a clear path to senior roles. My inbox chimed with praise from people who attended the panel. Mr. Caldwell's apology sat read and unanswered. I set aside the decision for the night and wrote instead a thank you note to the woman who invited me to the panel. Gratitude felt better than revenge. I allowed myself a small pleasure: a hot chocolate with whipped cream on the balcony, watching the city glow. The week that started with a cruel sentence had become a blur of choices that felt like doors opening. On decision day, I woke early and wrote down 3 non-negotiables: respect, growth, and meaningful work. I called my sister to share, and she refused to let me waffle. I opened each offer one by one. The stable firm's schedule clashed with my desire for a life beyond work. The second had money but felt like a treadmill. The third offered mentoring but was riskier financially. The nonprofit tugged at my heart like a steady hand. I realized the pattern. Wherever I felt seen, I wanted to stay. I drafted responses, careful and confident. I accepted the mentor-rich role at the third firm, but asked for a flexible week to finish a small consulting project for the nonprofit because I couldn't let that connection go. The company agreed. I typed the acceptance email with shaking fingers and then deleted it, wrote it again, and finally hit send. A weight lifted like a breath released. Then my phone buzzed with a message that made my heart drop. Mr. Caldwell had been promoted, and his new profile popped up on my feed with a smiling photo. My anger flared for a second, sharp and hot. I breathed slowly, reminded myself of the bigger victories. I had 3 offers and had chosen wisely. He could climb at his pace. My climb would be mine. The next week started with orientation at the new firm. People introduced themselves warmly. The mentor who'd promised growth smiled with an easy confidence that felt like a map. I sat in meetings absorbing methods and asking questions like a student swallowing knowledge. The work was messy, which thrilled me. I stayed late to help a junior team member untangle project logistics and found joy in teaching. At home, the kitten knocked over a plant and stamped the floor with muddy paws. The chaos felt like home. News from the old office circulated. Small rumors, nothing concrete, but one piece stuck. Mr. Caldwell had been involved in a cost-cutting move that left some colleagues without support. My chest tightened. I sent a private message to a former coworker checking in. She poured out the truth, how morale crumbled, how promises were hollow. Hearing it stung in an old way, but also confirmed that I'd done the right thing leaving. I threaded my way through days of new tasks and late-night learning. Each small success, an improved process, a grateful email, stacked up like bricks. Slowly, the bruised part of me began to fade. I was building something different, piece by piece. 3 months in, my life felt steadier. I had a routine: morning coffee, team stand-ups, lunch with colleagues who now felt like friends. The mentor watched me bloom, offering feedback that hit like warm sunlight, clear and kind. One day, a client presented a crisis, A volunteer database went corrupt before a huge delivery. I pulled up my sleeves, rallied the team, and we rebuilt the system overnight. We delivered on time. The client sent a heartfelt note that landed like validation. I felt proud in a way words in my old office never reached. But the story threw a twist again. A former coworker reached out with a lead on freelance contract work that could bridge my income to savings. It was tempting. Money worries still whispered. I accepted the contract, balancing it with my new role. Juggling felt risky but doable. Then a photograph appeared on social media. Mr. Caldwell smiling at an award ceremony with a headline that framed him as an industry hero. A cold knot formed in my throat. For a moment I wanted to shout that the photo was a lie, that the award didn't fix the harm he caused. Instead, I posted a small update about my recent wins. Likes came, and messages, and one reader wrote that my post inspired them to apply for a job they thought they couldn't have. The world was messy, people wore masks, but my small, honest steps were proving themselves in ways that mattered. The freelance work became more than a stopgap. It taught me new skills and stretched my confidence. I learned to negotiate contracts and manage remote clients. I felt my savings grow like a plant sprouting leaves. Meanwhile, at the firm, my mentor recommended me for a leadership workshop. I hesitated, but she smiled and said, "You need to claim the room." The workshop forced me to speak up in unfamiliar ways and to lead a small project. I stumbled but kept going. The team noticed. At home, my sister surprised me with a small celebratory dinner for my first big freelance payout. We toasted like it was a medal. Then came another twist. An anonymous comment on my LinkedIn questioned my rapid success, suggesting it was luck. The comment burned for a day. Then I wrote a response about steady effort and shared it. The reply chain turned supportive. I realized that public judgment would come, whether I deserved it or not. I learned to answer with facts, not fury. Each time I proved competency, my inner voice loosened its grip on the memory of Mr. Caldwell. The more I built, the less his words had power over my life. 6 months from the day I walked out, things shifted again. The firm asked me to lead a pilot program that could become a permanent department. It was risky. If it failed, I could be back to square one. I accepted. The pilot demanded long days and tough decisions. I called upon every late-night fix and problem-solving habit I'd honed. We hit a major milestone, an efficient process that saved time for the whole company. The mentor beamed like a proud teacher. The pilot's success brought more attention, and with it, offers to speak at more events. I found myself standing on tiny stages telling my story of leaving and rebuilding. Audiences nodded, and some approached with job offers. Strange ambition rose inside me, not the brittle kind that seeks vengeance, but a quiet hunger to create a life built on meaning. Then life added another layer. My sister moved in for a while, needing a place after a breakup. Our apartment was filled with laughter, late-night talks, and shared chores. She reminded me to celebrate small wins. I realized I had become someone who offered help, not just took it. The world felt full of changing rooms, with doors opening and closing, and I had learned to choose which doors to step through. On a rainy Tuesday, I received a message that changed the tone of the game. A journalist wanted to interview me about workplace courage. I braced for questions, and for the old voice to feel triumphant on the page. I agreed. During the interview, I told the truth, about feeling small, about the shove that made me leave, about the offers and the work that followed. The journalist's article painted a picture of someone who used hurt as fuel. The piece went live, and overnight my inbox filled with messages from strangers, thanking me for sharing. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Priya who said she had been on the verge of staying in an abusive job until she read my story. She had quit the next day and found a new position that respected her. Her note made my eyes sting. The impact of my small bravery echoed in ways I hadn't imagined. I sat in the office, watching rain smear the window, and felt both humility and strength. The journalist's piece brought a new twist, an offer from a career coach to collaborate on a workshop for people leaving toxic jobs. I hesitated, then accepted. The week had started with a boss's cruel line, and now it had sprouted into something that could help others find their way. As the year turned, my world rearranged. The workshop with the career coach filled quickly. People wanted help stepping into respect. I prepared materials, exercises, and honest stories. Each session reminded me of the small bench where I had first decided to fight back. One evening, after the workshop, a participant hugged me and whispered, "You gave me the map." Tears blurred my vision. Meanwhile, the pilot program at work evolved into a department, and I was promoted to lead it. The mentor cheered with genuine pride. My freelance clients stayed loyal, and my savings thickened like a protective layer. I began to imagine teaching full-time, helping others find safe doors. But then a twist I hadn't prepared for. An anonymous blog posted about office politics and included my name with speculation, painting me as an opportunist who left to climb the ladder. The post stung and made colleagues ask awkward questions. I addressed it directly in meetings, transparent and calm. My honesty dismantled the rumors faster than gossip could spread. I realized again that truth was my strongest tool. The week closed with a quiet dinner at home, the kitten purring, the apartment warm. I thought of Mr. Caldwell watching his own image in lights and felt a strange compassion. Maybe people who hurt others hurt themselves more. A year after the day his words landed, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a nonprofit I had once helped remotely. They wanted to partner on a national pilot and asked if I would consult. The project would be big, a chance to shape systems that actually help people. I took it. The work was intense. Travel followed, meetings, late-night planning. I felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with proving anything. It was about doing. During a transit layover, my phone lit up with an email subject line that made my stomach drop. A lawsuit filed by a former contractor at my old company alleging unfair practices. My heart thudded. The article mentioned Mr. Caldwell's name in a short paragraph. I felt a cold flash of vindication and discomfort. The world was complex. Justice sometimes arrived in ways that made people suffer. I did not celebrate. Instead, I focused on my work. I called a friend who still worked at the old place to check on people. She was angry and exhausted. I offered to help where I could, giving advice on processes. The more I gave, the less the lawsuit occupied my head. My life had grown into work that mattered. Opportunity kept arriving, but this time with a different tone. A small tech company asked me to help design inclusive hiring policies. I agreed, bringing my workshop framework and stories into policy work. The days were full and purposeful. One afternoon, near dinner, my sister burst in with a grin. She had an offer she loved and wanted to celebrate. We cried and laughed and toasted with sparkling water. Life felt like a tapestry of small victories. Then a twist that surprised me. Mr. Caldwell reached out through LinkedIn with a message that said, "Can we talk?" My hands hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to block him forever. Another part wanted closure. I agreed to a short call, planning boundaries. When we spoke, his voice was softer than I remembered. He apologized again, but this time he spoke of his own faults, how fear had driven him to belittle others, and how he was trying to change. I listened without judgment. I didn't forgive immediately, but I accepted his responsibility. The call didn't fix the past, but it loosened a knot I hadn't known was still there. Afterwards, I walked outside into a rain-washed evening and felt lighter. Closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant placing the memory on a shelf where it no longer controlled me. Months later, the pilot program I led became a model others wanted to copy. My team expanded, and I hired people who reminded me of myself. Hungry, kind, stubborn. Each hire was a careful choice. I wanted to build a culture where people felt seen. The nonprofit partnership grew into a full-time consultancy project that allowed me to travel and learn more about how systems could support people. My life filled with projects, late-night calls, and the steady hum of work that meant something. One afternoon, my mentor emailed with an invitation. She was stepping into a bigger role and wanted me to take on more responsibility permanently. I felt a rush of pride and fear. Still, the path forward felt clear. I accepted. On the ride home, I scrolled through old messages, found the resignation note I had handed to Mr. Caldwell, and felt a strange tenderness. The words that once hurt had become a map. I paused and typed a short note to my younger self. "You were brave." The kitten jumped into my lap and nudged my face. I laughed and felt gratitude for small things. As the business grew, so did my voice. I began writing short essays about workplace respect and the power of honest leadership. Publications picked them up. Strangers messaged with stories of their own exits and entries. With the attention came offers, boards, speaking fees, consultancy projects. I learned to say no. Saying no felt like sculpting an edge, shaping what mattered. One twist came when a former teammate from my old office reached out with a plea. She had been passed over and needed help crafting a complaint. I helped her gather facts and find legal resources. The process was painful but necessary. In helping her, I learned more about systems that needed fixing. My work shifted further into design and policy, not just operations. It felt like growing from fixing household plumbing to designing the whole house. I kept a small ritual. Every month I'd take a day to sit in the park and read, remembering why I started. The park bench was now a place of reflection, not panic. The memory of Mr. Caldwell had lost its sharp edge and was now a lesson pillaged into my story. One evening, I received an unexpected email. A startup accelerator wanted me as a mentor for a cohort. They had read my essays and thought my approach could shape new leaders. I accepted and spent weeks mentoring founders, helping them think about sustainable growth and humane workplaces. The founders listened, and some changed practices right away. It felt like planting seeds. Then life threw a private twist. My sister was offered a job across the country and asked if I would help her move. We packed boxes, laughed at old photos, and cried over the kitten's stuffed mouse. Helping her felt like closing a circle. She had been my anchor through the week I had quit. When she left, the apartment felt quieter, but fuller in a different way. The mentor at work congratulated me for the accelerator role, then slipped a note into a meeting, an opportunity to lead a national task force on workplace culture. The thought made my stomach buzz. I thought of the bench, the panel, the offers. A life that started in a sharp moment of injustice had grown into a path that could change systems. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, and I welcomed it. As responsibilities grew, I stayed careful to keep my compass. Respect, growth, meaning. The National Task Force required travel, meetings, and tough discussions. I found myself in rooms with CEOs and community leaders, advocating for humane policies. My voice carried weight, and I used it for small, sensible changes, better onboarding, clearer feedback loops, stronger mental health support. One twist came when an influential leader challenged my ideas publicly. It stung, but I countered with data and stories from the field. The leader softened and later thanked me privately. The win felt real because it changed practices that affected real people. On a quieter note, I bought a small plant for my desk, a cactus that had survived 2 moves and 1,000 meetings. It became a tiny symbol, resilience in green. Sometimes the old hurt returned in small pangs, like a string that vibrated when touched. I would place my hands on the desk and breathe, remembering small victories. The week I had left with a wound had turned into years of steady work to make things better for others, and not only myself. One night, after a long meeting, I sat alone in my office and read an old message from Mr. Caldwell. It was brief. I see you're doing well. I'm sorry. I stared at the words and felt something like peace. My path hadn't been about public proof. It had been about building a life anchored in worth. The National Task Force released recommendations, and several companies implemented them. I watched the change ripple, and it felt deeply satisfying. People I had mentored sent updates, jobs found, confidence rebuilt. The freelance contracts continued, and my savings allowed me to take a sabbatical later that year. During the sabbatical, I visited a small coastal town and walked on a beach at dawn, feeling the sun warm my face. I thought of the bench, the kitten, the angry meeting where it all began. The memory no longer burned. It guided me. A final twist moved in quietly. An old colleague called to say she had been promoted and wanted me to consult for her team. She thanked me for helping her find her voice years ago. The call felt like a closure that hummed like music, not triumphant, just right. Years later, I teach workshops, consult, and sometimes sit on panels. People still find my early post and reach out. I never became loud or vengeful. My victory was quieter. I built something I was proud of and helped others build too. One afternoon, a young woman came up to me after a talk, eyes bright, and said, "My boss told me nobody would hire me. I left, and now I have 3 offers." She held out her phone, smiling. I felt my heart clench with the strange, sweet echo of my own past. I hugged her. Her story was mine and not mine, proof that a sharp sentence could start a new life. I told her to choose a door that would help her grow. She nodded, tears in her eyes. As she walked away, I thought of the week that began with a cruel line and unfolded into a map. Life, I realized, is not revenge but repair. Firm, kind, steady. I kept doing my work, quietly changing rooms, choosing doors, and helping others find benches to start from. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell to get notified the moment we drop a new story, and don't forget to like the video to help others find it.